History gets polished, edges smoothed. But revolutions are not clean. They are born in fire, in smoke, in men who hold the line when fear claws at the ribs. Victory was not inevitable. The revolution was forged in war. But it is understood in conversation, around tables, between friends, with books open and arguments alive. This is Rogue Island, ground truth of the American Revolution.
Hey guys, my name is Bjorn. Welcome to our fourth episode of Rhode Island. Today I am here with my daughter, Grace Bruckshaw. Want to say hi? No? Don't be shy. And then I am here with my good friend and co-host, Ben Powers.
Hey,
Ben, how you doing today?
I'm good, Bjorn. I'm good. I'm excited. So today we're going to talk about the Southern campaign, the race to the Dan. Grace, when I say the race to the Dan, what does that mean to you? It doesn't have to mean anything to you. I've just put you on the spot, but it is about our favorite guy. Who's our favorite general?
Nathaniel Greene.
Yes,
Exactly.
Nathaniel.
It's all about Nathaniel Greene. All right. So Bjorn, why don't you kind of set conditions for us real quick? I'll do most of the talking, as you said, but tell us what's Nathaniel Greene doing in down in South Carolina and North Carolina right now?
So right now, Nathaniel Greene is fighting. Well, first of all, he was in charge. Washington placed him in charge of the Southern Command, of the Southern Army. Excuse me. So right now he's down south and he's fighting the British in what people would describe as a tactic that is not normal, right? He lost battles, but he ended up winning the war
Exactly.
in a certain sense, right? What he would do is he would stop, the British and them would fight, he would run and have the British chase after him all through the backwoods. He had help. Do you know who the Swamp Fox is?
No clue.
Oh, Francis Marion. I mean, we know that the movie Patriot is loosely, and when I say loosely, I'm being generous about the Swamp Fox, Francis Marion. But he had help with that. And he was hitting the British and he was tiring out their forces and eventually helped corner them. Do you know where? Where did they surrender? You got to know this.
No.
Yeah. Where?
York.
York. Oh, she had York part right.
All right.
So, yeah, that's what's going on right now.
Okay, you're exactly right. So the race to the Dan is kind of exactly what you talked about, where this all started. It's kind of the first exhibit of Greene's strategic thinking. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. It's a little slideshow about the race to the Dan.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, the reason we even have Nathaniel Greene down in command of the Southern Command to begin with is because Horatio Gates failed. Horatio Gates was originally put in command of the Southern Command in 1780. Prior to that, there was a Massachusetts general named Benjamin Lincoln. He was the guy who was in charge of the Southern Command, and he was in command of the defense of Charleston, South Carolina, which was kind of the premier city, the Philadelphia of the Southern colonies almost. And it was a major port. It's where a lot of the more wealthy colonists lived. There was considered to be a baseline of loyalists that could be won over to the Southern cause if the British military and the British ministry focused on the Southern colonies. So Henry Clinton sent a large task force to the Southern colonies in early 1780. They take Charleston. Benjamin Lincoln is defeated. The Continental Army decides to send a reinforcement of troops from the Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware lines under Horatio Gates down south in order to bolster the Patriot cause. And in August of 1780, Cornwallis defeats Horatio Gates at the Battle of Camden. And so that effectively ends continental strength in South Carolina. The remnants retreat to North Carolina. There is still scattered militia resistance. As you said, Francis Marion is operating in certain parts of South Carolina, but Cornwallis feels as though he has really established a strong foothold in South Carolina. He's moving west to clear out what they call the back country, but his goal is to get up into North Carolina and kind of expand the lodgment that they've created. Cornwallis really thinks he's in control at this point.
So
So
Ben, real quick, if you don't mind. So Horatio Gates was defeated. Now, what led up to Horatio Gates being replaced? Was it that battle, or was it something long term that had continued to happen?
it was basically that battle because Gates it pains me to say this because I'm not a Gates apologist, but I don't dislike him as much as several people do. But he exhibited poor generalship in the lead up to that battle, in that he made some really poor tactical and operational choices about how he was going to maneuver his forces. He did not properly use guys like Francis Marion as intelligence assets, good screening, things like that. You could argue that he misplaced his troops based off his understanding of European tactics. Um, as a lot of our listeners probably know, in 18th century linear warfare, you put your premier units on the right of your line. That's the place of honor. And that's where he put his continental troops. These are going to be my boys on the right of the line. So he had militia troops, less well trained, some very green, on his left. And he wasn't thinking that, gee, my opponent's probably going to do the exact same thing. And so my least good troops are going to be up against Cornwallis's best troops. And that's exactly what happened. And Gates expected uh, those militia to stand against like guards brigade guys, and it was just an unfair comparison. So understandably, those guys broke, and that put a lot of pressure on the remaining Continentals, and they were eventually surrounded. They lost Baron de Cobb, who was a the second in command of these forces. And the Continental forces were able to retreat to some extent, but they lost a lot of troops to capture, as well as wounds and death. So, and during that, Gates could have saved face at a minimum by showing some valor on the battlefield, but he left the field, and he didn't just fall back to maintain operational control. Like, he got the heck out of there. He didn't stop riding until he got back up to North Carolina, basically. Like, he really fled, and his reputation could not recover from that. It took a little bit of time for news of the defeat to get to the Continental Congress, and then there were discussions about what is there to be done. But eventually, the Congress deferred to Washington's wishes and appointed Greene, who is the guy that Washington wanted to begin with down there after the fall of Charleston.
Because it's interesting. A lot of people, we hear about the Battle of Saratoga, like the turning point, right? And Horatio Gates was the guy in charge there, right?
That's what he
He,
built his entire reputation on.
yep. So it's interesting to hear all of a sudden he helped turn the tide of the war at that one specific battle, and now he's down south and he's being replaced, and he's not, and he runs like a chicken, I guess you
And,
could say.
that shows two things. The first thing it shows is that the commander's responsible whether things go right or go wrong. So things go great, the commander's a hero, regardless of what he may have actually done. Things go wrong, the commander's responsible, regardless of whether it's entirely his fault or not. In terms of Camden, I honestly think it was Gates's decisions that led to the defeat. It wasn't even a pitched battle, in that not Greene, excuse me, Gates chose certain ground. Hey, we're going to defend this ground, or he knew where Cornwallis was, and okay, we're going to attack this specific position. It was literally a meeting engagement. He was kind of just moving south blindly. We're going to find Cornwallis. Cornwallis heard of their approach. He started moving north to meet them, and Gates was like, surprised that Cornwallis was so close, and he's like, all there is to do now is fight. And so there was no real preparation. Whereas Saratoga, uh, Gates first off had very experienced commanders under him, not only Arnold, but he had Learned, he had Poor, and he was able to have the benefit of prepared defensive positions and a lot of reinforcement. And he was waiting for Burgoyne to attack his positions. The tables are almost turned, in that although DeKalb was a fine subordinate commander, Gates did not have the luxury of knowing the terrain. He was not on the defensive. He didn't know where the enemy was. All the advantages he had at Saratoga were gone, and he was not a battlefield improvisation, think on his feet kind of commander, and it really showed.
How many, and one more last question before you can go. How many troops did Gates face at Camden
It,
against the British?
well, and this is the crazy part because Cornwallis was outnumbered almost 2-1. I want to say it was like
Wow.
2,000 British and loyalists against 4,000 militia and Continentals, and it was mostly militia. It was easily over 1,000 militia troops, probably
Wow.
closer to 1,500. So in terms of numbers, Gates had a decided advantage. But the when you don't have the proper leadership to motivate and inspire those part-time soldiers, you're not able to use them to full effect. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further along about a guy who knew how to motivate and inspire those militia as we get a little beyond. But anyway, so after August, Cornwallis really feels like he's in control of South Carolina. He spends the fall kind of cleaning up the battle space, and he's really focused on moving north into North Carolina. But things are not going as well as he thought they were going to go. He's got high confidence. As I stated, he wants to move into North Carolina, and there's a little bit of a setback in October of 1780 at a place called Kings Mountain. That is where a loyalist force under British Major Patrick Ferguson is defeated and annihilated by a force of what's called over the mountain men, troops from over the mountains in what is now Tennessee, from the South Carolina backwoods, the Virginia backwoods. They kind of just wanted to be left alone. They didn't really, they certainly did not want to have the British come and impose royal rule on them, but they didn't really care about who was in charge as long as they could kind of live their lives. But ostensibly, the popular story is that Ferguson, kind of threatened to bring fire and sword to their communities if he did not receive the support he needed, and so they banded together and inflicted a defeat on him. So this is the first sign to Cornwallis that things may not be going as great as as he was hoping in South Carolina. So it's a bit of a shock, but it doesn't change his overall feeling that he has South Carolina subdued and he's ready to move into North Carolina. It does deprive him of a fairly significant force of loyalist troops who have either been killed, captured, or paroled to their homes after the Battle of Kings Mountain. And it also deprived him of a pretty good commander in Ferguson.
Now, why was South Carolina so important to him?
S- South Carolina was important for a couple reasons. Number one, it was viewed as sort of a pivot point in the southern colonies. You've got Georgia to the south, you've got North Carolina and Virginia to the north. It was sort of the base of operations from which the British were going to try to spread out in order to be able to secure the entire southern colonies. The idea was if they could secure the southern colonies, that could disrupt the Continental Congress. It could disrupt the sense of unity among the Continental forces, and they might be able to bring the Americans to the negotiating table at a disadvantage. South Carolina operationally was important because he needed to secure his rear and secure his supply lines before he moved into the North Carolina.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, because a lot of people don't really know too much about South Carolina. And when you think of like these important colonies and these strategic places, you think of New York, right? You think of massive Philadelphia, right? You hear about these places, but people don't realize how important South Carolina was as
No,
well.
you're exactly right. After 1778, after the Battle of Monmouth, the entire focus kind of shifts to the south. You still have things happening in the northern colonies in 1779, 1780, but the weight of the two things have happened. Number one, as we know, when we talked about in our last episode, the French have come in, so the British don't have a colonial problem anymore. They basically have a World War problem. They've got to worry about, okay, are we still going to be able to secure the colonies? We got to worry about our colonies in the Caribbean now, which were more valuable to the British ministry. We have to worry about India. We have to worry about Gibraltar. So their forces are literally now fighting a global war. That's number one. Number two, they've been banging their head against the northern colonies and the middle colonies for the last 4 years. They're trying a new strategy in the southern in the southern colonies. So there should be a lot more scholarship and focus on the southern colonies than traditionally you hear. You kind of get through the first years of the war, you get to Monmouth, and all of a sudden somehow we're in Virginia. Well, why are we in Virginia in 1781, and why is Yorktown so important? But with the 250th anniversary of the Revolution, South Carolina is doing an amazing job of telling its own story, creating a Liberty Trail that's connecting their different historic sites.
Awesome. It's good to know it. And correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't South Carolina hesitant about signing the Declaration of Independence?
Initially, like if you watch, John
Yeah.
Adams on HBO and things like that, certainly, because there was when the war was focused in the North, the Southern colonies kind of felt like, do we really have a dog in the hunt? Because do we want to uh, pledge our, lives, treasure, and sacred honor for our brothers to the North? But things kind of come to a head when the British start turning their attention to the South. And actually, Clinton tried to invade Charleston in 1776 as well, but he was
Yep.
turned back because uh, I wouldn't call it poor operational planning per se, but they didn't have very good intelligence. And so when they tried to do their initial landings, they actually faced water obstacles that they weren't expecting and things like that. Uh, there's the legend, which is actually a truthful legend, that the palmetto logs that the colonists used to build their defenses actually were very good at repelling cannonballs because they were kind of flexible. They couldn't punch holes into them. The cannonballs kind of bounced off. That's kind of a legitimate thing. And so after the aborted attempt in 1776, Howe kept his focus on the north, and then of course Burgoyne had his northern strategy, and so it isn't until post 1778 that the British ministry and then Clinton is now the commander in chief are ready to turn their attention south again.
That was a Battle of Sullivan's Island, correct?
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
And it's
That's
funny because, and I don't want to jump on. I wrote an article about the Battle of Block Island where, what was it, 8 Continental Navy ships that were just by Isaac Hopkins fought the HMS Glasgow that was carrying documents to South Carolina for that battle.
that's
So it's kind of right. So that's pretty cool. And I just remember Battle of Sullivan's Island. I do remember that. So
we're gonna have another conversation about that. All their different episodes. So
I know, huh?
give me 1 second here. So Greene shows up and he takes command on the 3rd of December in 1780. I want to say it's in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, outside the Mecklenburg courthouse. And he kind of changes his approach in which he is not trying to meet Cornwallis head on in a traditional battle unless he's going to be able to do so favorably. So he's done a couple things. He is using his small staff and subordinate officers to get him a really good intelligence picture of what the terrain looks like in North Carolina, river crossings, where they can cache supplies, different routes of march. And he's also makes the decision that in order to be able to feed his troops and also act as a blocking force against Cornwallis, who he knows is operating in northwest South Carolina, he detaches what he calls a flying army under Daniel Morgan to head west into South Carolina, not specifically to engage in a decisive battle, but to screen against Cornwallis's approach, to kind of also put Cornwallis on the horns of a dilemma. Do I go after Morgan? Do I go after Greene? And also make it a little easier to feed his troops, because the less troops you have in one place, the more easy it is to forage or obtain food. And this was areas that had been picked over by different militia groups and the British operating in those counties. So he had to really take forage and supplying his troops into account. Now, it usually goes against good military theory to divide your force in the face of the enemy, but Greene figures out a way to make it work in sort of an unorthodox manner.
So did real quick. So did Greene run his strategy and what he thought would work by Washington first, or did he just say, "Hey, I think this is what's going to work," and just did it?
No, he definitely was not looking for Washington's approval. There would not have been time to move that information back up to the north. Obviously, he kept Washington informed about what he was
Yep.
doing, but Greene is definitely an independent commander operating.
Would Washington have given him say, "Hey, you do what you need to do," or is it more like you could do it, but just let me know?
Well, I think it definitely would have been, keep me informed, but you have full
Yeah,
authority to operate as you see fit.
perfect. Okay, awesome.
So now Cornwallis knows that he's got to regain some level of initiative now that this flying army has moved into South Carolina under Morgan. He still wants to move north. He still wants to destroy uh, the Continental Army or the Continental troops, and he wants to regain the initiative. He kind of feels like he's on the back foot now that Greene is dividing his forces and Morgan is moving into Western South Carolina.
So real quick, Grace, where else was Daniel Morgan?
Saratoga.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It all goes back to Saratoga. It's amazing all the different Saratoga guys that are showing up. We've got Gates is showing up. We've got uh, Morgan is showing up. These guys are all over the place.
Now, when Greene split his troops, Morgan mostly had militia, or were they still part of the Continental Line?
No, he definitely had continent and not Continental Line with him, excuse me, but he also his was a predominantly militia force.
Gotcha.
So he's got a small force of cavalry under William Washington, who is a
Yep.
distant cousin of George Washington, who's kind of a dragoon leader. He's got the hard core of the Continental Line left over from Camden with him, to include my guy Robert Kirkwood of the Delaware Line,
Yeah.
my favorite. And he's got militia forces with him, and his militia forces are growing as he's operating in. This is early January of 1781. As he's maneuvering in and around uh, the battle space, trying to get intelligence on Cornwallis, trying to delay and disturb Cornwallis's plans, and also screen Greene. More militia are flocking to his colors, and they eventually rally at a meeting place called the Cowpens,
Mhm.
which is was a place where as cattle were being driven from the back country to market in the lowlands, that was a place where you could camp out, graze your cattle, rest, reorganize, and it was a known location and a place with space and access to water, etc. So it was a smart place for Morgan to use as a rally point. But it turns out auspiciously to be a place that is also contains some defensible terrain. And we're going to find out about that in a second
How
here.
many troops did he have, real quick?
Oh man, that you put me on the spot a little bit.
Sorry, man.
That's all right. He's got and I should have prepared better, but I'm comfortable saying that on the 17th of January 1781, when the Battle of Cowpens is fought, he's probably got just shy of 2,000 troops with him, Morgan.
So is he hitting the British in small pockets, and while Greene is moving away,
No,
or
he's
is he?
he's acting more as a screening force.
Okay.
He's not he's his I'm not saying that I can account for every skirmish that took place in January of
Yeah.
1781, but he's making no major moves and he's not trying to get decisively engaged. He's
Gotcha.
really trying to just keep Cornwallis on the back foot and keep Greene screened and allow for both colonial elements to be able to secure forage and supplies. But at the Battle of Cowpens, Cornwallis dispatches Tarleton's legion of roughly 1,100 British troops and loyalists against Morgan. And Morgan knows they're coming, and Morgan is a battlefield innovator. He is the kind of commander that can think on his feet. So he sets up a tremendously clever defense where he puts his militia troops in the front, but tells them that all they need to do is fire twice, and then they can retrograde to the rear, and that's going to create the impression of a retreat, but it's actually a planned withdrawal. And then there's a second line of militia and then a third line of Continental troops. Now, there's a lot of recent scholarship about what really happened at the Battle of Cowpens. Was Morgan's tactics and his operational plan responsible for the American victory? Was it Tarleton's overconfidence that was responsible? Were there some happy battlefield incidents that happened that just luck went the Americans' way? But the bottom line is it is an American defensive victory, and Tarleton's Legion suffers significant casualties.
And your boy Captain Kirkwood, right?
Yeah,
Kirkwood.
yeah, exactly.
What did he write? What was it?
Kirkwood, all in his journal at the day of that battle, all he writes is defeated Tarleton. That's a
That's
very
great.
not a
So
big flowery discussion about what happened
that's great.
at Cowpens. But so at the end of the day, at Cowpens, you have a defeat inflicted on Tarleton. You have at very little cost to the Americans, and you have Cornwallis is kind of now shocked that this has occurred. But the hornet's nest has now been kicked over. When I say that this was an operational trigger and it compresses the timeline, Cornwallis could have made a move at his choosing had Cowpens not occurred. He might have gone after Greene. He might have tried to maneuver uh, Morgan into a less favorable defensive terrain, but because this defeat is inflicted on him at Cowpens, and it has degraded his cavalry, it has degraded his intelligence collecting capability, and it's inflicted casualties. Now he's like, okay, I've got to go after these guys now. I've got to regain the initiative, and I got to hit them hard. So the timeline that could have lasted throughout the winter into early spring of 1781 of maneuvering around northern South Carolina is now compressed, and he's going to go hard after Morgan and Greene. And initially, he wants to go hard after Morgan because he's the closer target.
Yep.
So
So Grace
Cornwallis,
had a question for you real quick,
what
Ben.
do you got, Grace?
Um, how many like artillery or cavalry did Nathaniel Greene have?
So that's a really good question. So he had a very small artillery element. There was hardly any at Cowpens at all. They had like what are called grasshopper guns, maybe, which are man portable small cannon that are not like the big guns that you saw at Saratoga. So the cavalry force that he had was a detachment of dragoons that is roughly 45 militia dragoons, 55 state dragoons, that's 100, and then 82 continental dragoons. So roughly 182. And he would have had, Greene would have had more cavalry than that with him overall, but that was the number of dragoons that were available to Morgan at Cowpens.
Were they effective?
Well, they were effective because they're the ones who, after the infantry inflicted major casualties on the attacking Tarleton's Legion, William Washington and the dragoons were let loose to pursue them. So they chased them off the battlefield.
Gotcha.
They were like the exploitation force.
Gotcha.
Now, according to Morgan himself, he only had 800 troops. But then
Wow.
there's a historian named Lawrence E. Babbitts, who is an incredible historian who wrote a book called A Devil of a Whipping about the Battle of Cowpens. And his estimate is with all the militia who came in, that there was probably about 1,900 troops total
Wow.
available to Morgan. And he
Wow.
did that through an examination of pension records. So and then Tarleton's force had two 3-pounder cannons from one battery of Royal Artillery, 24 troops manning those cannons with him. But they really didn't play any role at the Battle of Cowpens. So at this point, Cornwallis is, okay, he's committing to the pursuit. He wants to destroy Morgan. He wants to destroy Greene, and he knows he has to move quickly. So this is the 18th through the 20th of January. He kind of brings his forces together. He tells them to strip down to be light infantry, meaning you're not going to be carrying extra baggage. He destroys his own wagons. He destroys his own personal goods. He tells all the officers that you're going to travel like the troops, and they commit to being a flying column to move as quickly as they can, because his goal is we're going to sacrifice comfort for a major operational victory. We're going to settle this once and for all. And Greene knows that he needs to be moving like a boxer. At this point, he needs to be able to get to a safe place where he can have his forces rejoin together and reconstitute. So his entire plan is he's going to retreat north into North Carolina, join back up with Morgan's force to create one coherent unit, and then retreat up into Virginia. And he's going to use the water barriers that run throughout North Carolina, the rivers that run east-west. And if he can get north of the Dan River, which flows between North Carolina and Virginia, and secure the crossings and ensure there are no boats on the southern bank and get over that river before Cornwallis, he feels he'll be in a safe place that he can then reconstitute his forces. So that's why they call it the race to the Dan. The race is on. And this is going to take place over a period of a few weeks between late January until 14 February of 1781.
Now, with Cornwallis, making his uh, guys light infantry, do you think that made things worse, or did it make things better for him?
It made things a lot worse for them in terms of the ability for them to be comfortable. because there was no real means to evacuate wounded. There was no means to bring tents. There was no means to bring any type of comfort items. So these guys are traveling light and sleeping rough and having to live off the land. Now, it would make things better for them if they're able to achieve their objective of capturing and destroying Greene's army. And these are
Gotcha.
even though it's a small force, less than 2,000 guys at this point, we're talking these guys are elite troops in terms of Tarleton's Legion and the troops of the Guards Brigade, and there's a really good regiments that make up this force. This is not a ragtag force, so these guys are able to live rough and travel fast and fight hard, and there's no reason for Cornwallis to doubt that he is going to. Be able to do well tactically if he can just force Greene into a fight.
Yeah, but Greene knew that's what his Cornwallis's plan was to try and learn to a fight.
Well, he knew that he could not stand toe to toe
Yep.
against Cornwallis unless he could set the conditions very favorably. So that's why
Gotcha.
he knew things were not favorable post Cowpens for a toe to toe fight. That's why he
Yeah,
needs to get up into Virginia to be able to
gotcha.
safely re-equip, rearm,
Yeah,
resupply the forces, reorganize even, and then perhaps he'll be able to pose a threat at a later time.
gotcha. Would Greene ever split his force up again with Morgan, or would they stay together after that?
He would detach forces from time to time, and we're going to talk about that in a second.
Gotcha.
So, as I indicate here, it's famously called the race to the Dan. And when I talk about intelligence, speed, and grit, for intelligence, I mean the military sense of the term. Greene needs to know where Cornwallis is, and so he creates uh, a new light infantry force. Once he links back up with Morgan, Morgan actually departs the battlefield at this time. He had sciatica, he had old wounds, and he asks to be relieved of his command. And Morgan uh, is the kind of guy, if he asks to leave, you know something's wrong. He's not a coward, he is not a weak man, but he could not stand the rigors of campaigning anymore. So Greene reluctantly parts ways with Morgan, and Morgan makes his way back to his home in Virginia. But now Greene has his forces reunited, but he creates a corps of light infantry that he wants to act as a screen, not to get into pitched battles again, but to provide intelligence, coordinate with local militia, and know where Cornwallis is at any given time. They both have to move quickly. They both have to gut through tough winter conditions. Even though we think the South is warm and sunny, it's cold, there's snow, it's miserable. You've been in the field in North Carolina in the winter.
Oh yeah, with snowing, sleet, and rain. Yeah.
I've had water in my canteen freeze in a training exercise at Fort Bragg, North Carolina before, so
Yep.
it could definitely be cold. And whereas Greene has little margin, he has to keep moving. If he stops to rest his troops, Cornwallis is going to close that gap. Uh, and Cornwallis can't stop to rest because that's going to give Greene an edge to start moving away from him. So it's no joke a race where Greene has a head start, but he has to fight to maintain it. And
It's
there's a
cat and mouse.
exactly now there's a battle at a place called Cowan's Ford, which takes place early on in the fighting, and that is where if you look at the map, you'll see a red line coming up from the bottom where it says Cornwallis departs starting
Yep.
on the 19th of January. And if you follow that straight up, you'll see it. The first place it kind of terminates is at Cowan's Ford on the 1st of February.
Yep.
And North Carolina militia did a tremendous job of screening Greene's retreat at that location. They fought, it wasn't a pitched fight, but Cornwallis led his troops under fire against the North Carolina militia across Cowan's Ford, but the militia held for a, a little bit of time against very elite British troops and bought Greene a little bit more time to keep moving. So Cowan's Ford is sort of the first big clash of the race to the Dan. And
Who
then
took over for Morgan after? Was it and were they in charge of that North Carolina militia or no?
no, at that point, the I want to say it was a guy named Huger who is now in charge of the light infantry. I would have to go back
Okay.
and double check that.
Yeah.
The smart people watching will probably know. But Morgan, it's kind of like Morgan was the man of the hour when he was needed because
Yep.
the light infantry, even though they're acting as a screen, they are a subordinate element to Greene. When Morgan was in command of the Flying Army, he was acting independently. He was working for Greene and he was his movements conformed with what Greene had directed him to do, but Morgan had independence of what he was going to do. The light infantry screen is working for Greene. They're reporting regularly and being told regularly what to do.
Good. Okay.
So, but this map shows between the end of the Battle of Cowpens, so early on the January the 18th, all the way through the 15th of February, you could see it's a race northeast across North Carolina, and it's just a tale of misery and woe with the British trying to keep up or eventually capture Nathaniel Greene, but they're never able to actually make their move in order to be able to bring them to battle. Because if they could have closed with Greene before he was made a river crossing and had a river to his back, or even better, caught him in the middle of a river crossing when he had combat power on both sides of the river, they could have inflicted a very serious tactical defeat.
Now, I don't know if you know this. This is probably just a curiosity question. But how far or how close did Greene actually ever get caught, or how close or how far away was the furthest point they were? Do you know?
So the best way to put that, and you asked a great question right there. That's the question to set it up. How close was it? By the time the Continentals reached the border between North Carolina and Virginia and crossed the Dan River, uh, Tarleton and his outriders got to the Dan River about 7 hours after
Wow.
Greene's last force crossed. And the main body under, I want to say it was General Charles O'Hara, who's a guards officer who's in charge of the Guards Brigade troops in Cornwallis's army. I think he got there 12 hours after, which sounds like a lot of time, but when you're moving by foot and horse, that's actually nick of time kind of stuff. So I contend if Cornwallis had another day, or if the Dan River was another 30 miles to the north, it would have been a very near run thing. But the reality of it is Greene got his forces across. They had all the watercraft they needed on the north side. There was no effective way for Cornwallis to cross and pursue. So Cornwallis is like, okay, we didn't get Greene, but Greene's army is intact, but does it really matter? If you're Cornwallis, you're thinking, I just drove Greene out of North Carolina. I've accomplished my goal. My goal, even though the goal of the pursuit was to crush Greene, I've still accomplished my strategic goal. There's no continental force in the Carolinas now. I'm in control of the Carolinas. The fact that Greene survived only matters if he comes back. So Cornwallis has actually achieved strategically what he wanted. But Greene's going to come back, and he comes back pretty quick. The Battle of Guilford Courthouse takes place only a month later, and within 3 days of crossing the Dan, Cornwallis was already facing troops that Greene was sending back south across the river. Small detachments while he reconstituted and built his forces back up. But by early March, he's strong enough to have his main body operating south of the river again, which brings them to the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, which, as we know and you alluded to before, it was a tactical defeat for for Greene's army, but they fought well. They mimicked a lot of Morgan's tactics from Cowpens. They inflicted immense casualties that Cornwallis could not afford on him at that battle, similar to what happened to Howe at the Battle of Bunker Hill. And it kind of convinced Cornwallis that maybe he didn't have the grip on the Carolinas that he thought he had. And that moved him to make his movement north into Virginia, where, as Grace said, 6 months after the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, or 7 months after the Battle of Guilford Courthouse in October 1781, at where, Grace? You said it before. It starts with a Y.
Oh, Yorktown.
Exactly. At Yorktown, Cornwallis is going to surrender to Washington, and we all know what happens there. So that's the race to the Dan, guys.
So, so now, right, Cornwallis comes this light infantry and makes his guys later. After Greene leaves, does Cornwallis go back to being a regular unit, or does he keep them light infantry?
No, they have to reconstitute. And he's always
Yeah.
going to have an element of light infantry, but they couldn't have fought at Guilford Courthouse in a light infantry configuration. They were going to need to have their artillery with them. They were going to need to have a more robust line infantry and things of that nature. So the stripping down to light infantry was specifically for the goal of running down Morgan and then eventually running down Greene and trapping him south of the Dan River. That was a tactical decision for that 4 week period or 3 week period in late January, early February of 1781.
It's interesting, right? You think about it, and I've heard people and I've read articles about, this exact campaign, and people say, oh, he was retreating, he lost, he lost, he lost. But when you look at the whole picture, did Greene really lose? You
No,
know?
because when you he took advantage of his opportunities as they were occurring. So it was I mean, you could say certainly tactically he lost day of. He's not in control of the field at Guilford Courthouse, but he's inflicting casualties that the British can't afford. And they could not have planned a better operation. If you had asked Cornwallis in December of 1780, was he going to be surrendering on the banks of the York River 10 months later, he would have asked you, where's the York River probably to begin with. But then secondly, he would have thought that you were crazy because it was uh, just not within his strategic plan at the time. He was focused on the Carolinas. So Greene was able to take advantage of a situation to set conditions to put Cornwallis on the horns of a dilemma that eventually drove him to make bad operational decisions. And
Interesting.
that's the strength of his generalship.
You want to ask a question? Oh, she got to take a drink first.
Did Greene ever realize, or not that Greene, sorry.
What?
Did Cornwallis ever realize what Greene's tactics were?
I don't think so. Because Cornwall, that's a really good question. I'm going to give you my opinion. I can't, you know, point you to a book and say, oh, it definitely
Yeah,
says this.
yeah.
But Cornwallis was a classically trained officer, as it were. So the idea of bringing an enemy to battle, that is going to be his focus. And the idea that Greene would be able to act as a hare to his hound, as it were, and continue to stay one step ahead of him. That is something that Cornwallis would not have considered a viable long-term strategy. He would think eventually we're going to be able to wear him down.
Now, how long after did Yorktown happen?
I mean, within 7 months of the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, you've got Guilford Courthouse takes place in March of 17 not yeah, March of 1781. The surrender at Yorktown's in October of 1781.
Yeah.
And so it's only the spring and summer. It's a very short time in the span of the war.
Now, Greene's down south. Did any part of the Northern Army come down and support Greene during this, or did they mostly stay up north protecting the northern aspect of
No,
it?
great. Yeah, Greene had everything he was going to get from the
Yeah.
Continentals with the remnants of the Camden Army. Even when Cornwallis moves into Virginia and starts operating in conjunction with the British forces that were operating in Virginia, uh, Washington is still very focused on taking New York City, and it's not until the late summer, fall of 1781 that they realize, well, we can maneuver down into the South, make Clinton think we are going to strike against New York City, but we'll move against Cornwallis on the peninsula, who's waiting to be evacuated by the British Navy based off orders that Clinton is going to that he hopes that Clinton is going to issue. So Clinton is still preoccupied with the defense of New York. Um, but Washington's going to husband those troops for a strike against originally New York and then against Cornwallis and Yorktown. So they're not sending major reinforcements from the main army down into the South. Greene's going to fight with what he has and whatever militia support he can coordinate with the various militia leaders and the governors of the southern states.
And if you ever seen that movie, or not the movie, the series Turn, right? I think it's the second to last episode where Washington looks and says, we're attacking Yorktown. It's where the spies were telling them, and Washington this whole time was thinking, we're going up to New York, we're going up to New York. And then that episode, he comes back, he's, we're going to Yorktown. She made the British think he was going to attack New
Exactly.
York
It was
to
a
keep the British troops there.
precisely. It was an excellent deception campaign. Absolutely no
It
doubt.
was, yeah, it absolutely was. And people don't give, from articles, people say, well, Greene retreated a lot. It wasn't like he got defeated and he lost men. It wasn't like a regular battle retreat. And we go back and we say it was a tactical retreat. He did it on purpose in order to gain an advantage on the British.
Exactly. It's just you make the comparison between Gates after Camden. That's a retreat.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
Greene is engaging a series of withdrawals in order to gain battlefield advantages and be able to preserve his army. It's completely different strategic calculus. Yeah, and
And the British got worn out from it.
no,
Right?
exactly. Because you can look at every major battle that Greene quote unquote lost. Guilford Courthouse, the siege of 96. I think it's Hobkirk's Hill, Utah
Yep.
Springs. Eventually, within a couple weeks, his British opponent is falling back or retreating because they can't sustain the casualties or the operational pace that Greene's forcing them to maintain. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so it's he was I've heard him referred to as Washington's strategist. So
Yep. Do you think he was the best general
he's
for
my
the
favorite.
second?
I'm gonna say he's my favorite general.
Okay. All right. I think, and I'm going to be biased here from being from Rhode Island, and I think he was, tactically speaking, the best tactical general. And a lot of people are like, well, he was Washington's second or right-hand man. I believe that. Other people may not. But I think his tactics down south led to the surrender of the British at Yorktown, and had 75% of that was due to Greene's tactics.
Oh, I mean, you can draw a direct correlation between what Greene did and the fact that Cornwallis wound up at Yorktown. So I'm in 100% concurrence with you. But anyway, all right, guys. So that's the race to the Dan.
Absolutely. This was a great episode. It's people really need to see the significance of the campaign down in the South and what Greene did, because if he didn't do that, do you think we would still have the surrender at Yorktown? Do you think, they wouldn't be fighting for a couple more years, or they would be fighting, a couple more years?
Well, if Cornwallis's army is still in the field, then exactly, the array of forces is dramatically different.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Ben, thank you again. It was such a great episode. Grace, good questions. I appreciate you making me look good. We are grateful for you guys watching our episode today. We invite you back. We have all our videos up on YouTube. We have our Facebook page called Rogue Island. Come give us a like and follow. And we will see you in a couple weeks for our next episode.
Awesome.
Still to be determined, though, right? Still to be determined. I am Bjorn.
I am Ben.
Sorry, go ahead, Ben. That's Ben, and this is Grace. Farewell, and have a great weekend.
Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.